In a clinic waiting room in Apgujeong, a woman in her 20s holds her phone flat in her palm. On the screen is an idol's face. She hands it to the surgeon the way you hand a barber a reference and say, "This one." She took a flight and crossed immigration and customs to do it, possibly after applying for a visa for this specific purpose. And a few blocks away, one clinic was found running 4 operating rooms at once, anesthetizing and closing patients in sequence so the schedule never idled. The industry she flew into will reach $8.6 billion a year by 2031. She believes the face on her screen is the face she has always wanted, and the wanting feels like it was her own idea. It was not. That face has a history, and it starts in 1954, 70 years before her appointment with an American military surgeon who cut a particular kind of eyelid into a Korean interpreter who was not injured, not sick, and had no urgent medical reason to be on the table. That interpreter's surgery created a new look and an industry built around it. Pop music, TV, and movies helped carry the look across a continent. An app sells it. The government refunds the tax at the border. Brokers skim the margin in the dark. And the same medical density that makes all this possible also gives Korea some of the best cancer survival rates in the world. You cannot understand one side without the other. The man who started all of it was David Ralph Millard, an American military surgeon trained in London by Harold Gillies, the New Zealander who rebuilt the shattered faces of soldiers in the First World War. In 1954, where the Korean War just ended, Millard shipped to Seoul as a plastic surgeon for the US Marine Corps. He found a country full of injuries and described it the way an 1870s prospector in California or Nevada described a glut of virgin ore. Korea, he wrote, was a paradise for plastic surgery. A lot of what he did there was very much repair in the traditional sense. He operated on children born with cleft lips, working out a method of rotating and advancing tissue that surgeons are still taught today. He reconstructed eyelids destroyed by burns. He closed faces torn open by shrapnel. The same surgeon who began Korea's plastic surgery industry first did work any decent person would call incredible healing. Then, one fine day, a Korean man who interpreted for the Marines came to him with a request that had nothing to do with injury. He just wanted his eyes made rounder and larger. His reason, as Millard recorded it, was that his eyes read as untrustworthy to the Americans he worked beside. Millard grafted cartilage to lift the bridge of his nose, cut a crease into his upper lids, and the interpreter walked out delighted, especially pleased when strangers began mistaking him for Mexican or Italian. There was almost nothing in the English language literature to guide him. Millard improvised on living Korean faces, then wrote up the technique himself in articles he gave titles like Oriental Peregrinations. His regular customers, by his own account, were Korean ladies of the night who worked the American military bases. Before he sailed home, he taught what he had devised to Korean doctors. Scholars who study this period have a name for what he was doing: de-orientalization, lifting Korean features out of what a Western eye saw as flat, one eyelid at a time. The double eyelid is now the single most common procedure performed in Korea. Its line back to a Marine Corps surgeon and to the women who served his fellow soldiers has dissolved completely. Meanwhile, the operation is understood by both the people who buy it and the people who sell it as something native to Korea. The correction worked so well that it stopped looking like a correction and started looking like a face. The whole industry would later run that move at scale, take the face, sell it as a product, and through pop culture exposure, let it mold into something people feel they have always wanted. Get off the train at Apgujeong and the station itself is selling surgery. The walls of the exits, the corridors, and the pillars by the turnstiles carry more than 100 separate advertisements, faces looking straight at you, each captioned with the operation it received: eyes, nose, maybe facial fat grafting. One ad there read simply, "I got surgery and confessed to her." The legally required warning about bleeding, infection, nerve damage, and asymmetry is printed too in a font set near angle height where almost no one going up the escalator will read it. Line 3, which runs under Gangnam, once carried roughly 3/4 of every plastic surgery advertisement in the entire Seoul subway. The buying is built to feel weightless. An app called Gangnam Uni lists more than 4,000 clinics the way Google Maps lists restaurants with reviews, prices, and a booking button. The procedures come in tiers like a menu. A buried stitch double eyelid runs around 600,000 won, an incision version about twice that, and in the Apgujeong blocks, you can expect to pay even more. A Chinese woman who gave her account to a magazine got a fat-dissolving injection one morning for the price of a nice dinner and, satisfied, booked a second procedure that afternoon to fill the hollows under her eyes before she had done any real homework on either. Recovery is sold as an inconvenience of a few days. A major Seoul's hospital's eyelid instructions tell patients only to bring sunglasses to wear afterward. The masks and the dark glasses and the faintly swollen faces on the streets around the clinics read as a local uniform, the dress code of the third post-operative day. Surgery can be sold this casually because the supply is packed in tight enough to behave like infrastructure. As far back as 2010, the health ministry counted more than 3 in 5 of Seoul's licensed plastic surgeons inside the single district of Gangnam. A pharmacist on the strip described a busy clinic writing over 50 prescriptions a day, which is why a pharmacy slot inside a surgery building once changed hands for the equivalent of 2.5 billion won. Faces go in, gauze and antibiotics come out, and the rent on the room next door tracks the output. Korea spent 2 decades exporting faces through music and television, and somewhere in the export, the faces stopped being individual people and hardened into a shared specification. A particular nose, a particular jawline, a particular eye, or a particular distance between the brows. In Korea, people openly size up each other's faces against the shared ideal. The hit drama My ID is Gangnam Beauty opens on exactly that instinct, its protagonist running a private point system on every face she passes. She scores a classmate a 70 on her eyes and nose, the next an 80, a girl with a few years of surgery behind her a 90, and keeps a perfect 100 for a rare natural beauty. Cosmetic surgeons run YouTube segments ranking the idol faces patients bring in most, working through names like Karina, Jong Won-young, and Minji, whose features then show up in consultation rooms across the region. What makes the specification a bit ironic is that the faces feeding it are heavily polished before anyone gets to see them. K-pop idol glow-ups have become their own genre of online discourse, the side-by-side of a pre-debut photo against the polished stage version, millions of views deep, with companies crediting style and confidence and comment sections crediting lots of surgery, sometimes even down to the names of the specific celebrity clinics. Multiply that by a whole industry, and the reference a tourist holds up on her phone is usually an endpoint already, a face that is itself the output of makeup, weight, lighting time, and then plastic surgery. She flies in asking a surgeon to make her a copy of a copy. So they come holding the reference. Korea sits first in the world for cosmetic procedures per capita, close to 9 for every 1,000 people, with an estimated 1 in 5 young Korean women having had work done. Before the pandemic, Chinese patients made up more than 60% of the foreign cosmetic caseload at the leading Gangnam clinics. Thai patients later overtook them, with nearly half of all Thai medical tourists in 1 year there specifically for cosmetic surgery. Vietnamese influencers fly in to get the nose redone and post the result to audiences who read it as inspiration. The volume has only climbed since. In 2025, foreign plastic surgery patients passed 233,000, part of a record 2 million foreign patients overall, a total that has roughly doubled every year since the pandemic. Skin and cosmetic work make up more than 74% of those visits. The Korean medical tourism industry truly is an industry. The state even refunds them. Foreign cosmetic patients can claim back the value-added tax on the surgery. In 2019, there were over 140,000 such refund cases. By 2024, that figure had passed 1 million. A country took the faces of its own citizens, made them the object the rest of the continent wanted, built the supply to deliver that one, and handed buyers a slice of their own money back at the border. The woman on the plane feels the want as the most personal thing about her, and the government discounts the receipt on her way out the door. Between the wanting and the body often sits a layer the buyer never sees. In 2015, prosecutors opened a sweeping investigation into Gangnam clinics and the brokers who fed them, and what they found was a shadow market running on foreign tourists. They estimated more than 2,000 illegal brokers were working in the country. The job was finding patients abroad and steering them to Gangnam, and it ran on things a Korean-only clinic could not supply. The right languages, a presence on the foreign apps where these decisions get made, and contacts back home willing to vouch for a specific surgeon. A Gangnam clinic owner who speaks only Korean cannot reach a 19-year-old in Chengdu deciding where to get her eyes done. The person who can is from where the patient is, the way the middlemen in almost any cross-border trade come from the country being sold to. Some were students who had worked out that a few phone calls and a car ride could turn into several million won. A registered agency takes a 15% commission for a university hospital and 30% for a private clinic. The illegal brokers took 50%, and in some cases as high as 90%. Cha Song-myun, who headed the Korean Plastic Surgeons Association, laid it all out. A surgery a Korean would pay 10 million won for, he said, could be sold to a Chinese patient for 100 million. The surgeon kept 10 and 90 vanished into the middle. The doctors, as Cha described it, were performing animals in a circus. They did the skilled, dangerous work while someone else collected most of what the patient paid. The brokers found the patients and took their cut. The rest happened inside the clinics. The markups charged to foreigners were set there. The fake charts were printed there. One Gangnam practice borrowed a Chinese card terminal from a money changer so its charges would read as Chinese rather than Korean, and over a few years it evaded something on the order of 10.5 billion won. The fraud was both domestic and foreign. Brokers chose procedures by margin rather than by need, steering patients towards the costliest operations regardless of what anyone had actually walked in wanting. And even the patients who came in through the front door without a broker were charged several times the Korean price for the same operation. Being foreign was its own tax, and the clinic set the rate. When a body becomes a unit moving down a line, the assembly line eventually produces what assembly lines produce: industrial accidents. On the 8th of September 2016, in Shinsa, a young man named Kwon Dae-hee lay on a table at a clinic called Small Face Plastic Surgery. He was 25, recently out of the army and about to head back to university, having his jawline contoured to fix a square jaw he had been self-conscious about for years, doing the ordinary thing the advertising had taught everyone to do. The clinic was running 4 operating rooms in rotation, anesthetizing and closing patients in sequence, so the schedule never idled. The director he met and assumed would carry out the entire surgery made the bone cuts and walked out to attend his other rooms. A nursing assistant, unlicensed to do this, was left alone pressing gauze on the wound for about 30 minutes. The trade has a word for what was going on here: ghost surgery. The surgeon whose name and reputation you picked off the website is not necessarily the one holding the saw once you are under. Kwon bled about 3,500 milliliters, near the entire blood volume of a small adult. A warning light blinked over the table while the sheets went dark. The surgery had run 11 hours, still unfinished, when the clinic finally called an ambulance. He never regained consciousness, and after roughly 50 days in intensive care, he died. His mother obtained the operating room footage and watched it more than 300 times, logging the failure minute by minute because the doctors maintained they had done nothing wrong. The appeals court used the term factory-style surgery to describe a place where no one was ever fully responsible for the body on the table. The director was sentenced to 3 years. The doctors involved kept their medical licenses. Kwon's death produced a law that carries his name, requiring cameras inside operating rooms, the only national mandate of its kind anywhere in the world. With all that said, it would be intellectually dishonest to ignore the fact that the same medical density that lets a clinic run 4 rooms at once is the density that puts an MRI on every corner. Korea's 5-year cancer survival rate sits around 73%, up from barely over half 2 decades earlier. Korean women now have a life expectancy of nearly 86 years, 3rd in the developed world. A patient who wants an MRI tends to get one within the week, often the same day. Meanwhile, Canadians wait a meeting of more than 10 weeks for the same scan. Foreign physicians fly into Seoul to learn the technique because that's where the technique is taught the best. The woman in the waiting room in Apgujeong will, in all overwhelming likelihood, walk out fine and get what she paid for. The system is too good for her not to, and that is exactly what lets her be casual about the risk. She flew in to be remade into a face that an American Marine first sketched onto an interpreter in 1954. Pop music helped distribute it across a continent until it felt normal. A polished idol image now carries it to her phone screen as a thing to want, the way your little brother might bring a picture of Ronaldo to his next haircut. A chain of brokers can skim 90% of what she pays in the dark. The cutting itself happens in a room she is not awake to see. She will pay, the state will refund a slice, and within the week she will look more like the photo than she did before. The picture on her phone is a picture. The face she wants was authored upstream by people who had their own reasons for doing so, and the want they manufactured reached her so early and so completely that it feels like the truest thing about her. Thank you for watching. If you want to go further, the sources behind this video are in a Notion doc linked in the description. My newsletter is linked there too. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of thing directly in your inbox. Subscribe to the channel before you click off the next one lands in your feed. I'll see you there.